Before we start diving into the story, please take a second to like this video and subscribe. It only takes a second, but it will help the channel grow. Thank you for your interest in our channel. I jolted awake in the dead of night, my heart pounding so fiercely I could barely catch my breath. It was 2:17 a.m., and a strange voice echoed from the upper floor of my Seattle apartment, a voice that felt both foreign and unsettlingly familiar. I sat up, sweat clinging to my skin, and listened as the disembodied murmur grew louder, slicing through the silence of my home like a shard of ice. I threw off my blanket and, with hesitant determination, slipped out of bed. My bare feet made soft, almost inaudible sounds on the cool hardwood floor as I crept through the darkened corridor. Every step I took heightened the strange mixture of dread and curiosity that had settled over me. "What is happening?" I whispered to myself, unable to shake the feeling that something was terribly off. Rounding the corner, I unexpectedly collided with Derek, my boyfriend, whose eyes were wide with an urgency I'd never seen before. "Caroline, I need to be somewhere," he stammered, barely meeting my gaze. Before I could ask any questions, he hurried past me, his footsteps echoing off the walls and leaving me with a bitter taste of confusion and unease. His secretive departure only deepened the mystery swirling in my mind. Determined to find the source of that haunting voice, I continued along the dim corridor until I reached the staircase. As I ascended, the whispers became clearer, and I soon recognized the fragile tone of my sister Brooke's voice. "Caroline, please, I need you now," she pleaded softly, her words laden with a vulnerability that made my heart ache. In that moment, I knew I couldn't ignore her call. Every nerve in my body was electrified with fear and anticipation as I rushed toward the sound. The apartment's shadows seemed to dance menacingly around me, each creak and murmur weaving a tapestry of secrets and half-truths. My mind raced. Was this really Brooke in distress, or was it another of her dramatic escapades? The uncertainty gnawed at me, leaving no room for idle doubts. I had no choice but to confront the unknown head-on, even as a gnawing sense of betrayal and hidden truths began to cast a long shadow over my thoughts. With every step, I felt that this moment was a turning point, a summons to uncover secrets that could shatter the fragile equilibrium of my life. Tonight, the mysterious midnight call was more than just a disturbance. It was a prelude to a transformation I could neither predict nor avoid. After the unsettling events of the night, I found myself wandering into the warm yet strangely gloomy lobby of a luxury hotel, seeking refuge from the turmoil swirling in my mind. I don't recall how I ended up here. Perhaps it was an unconscious decision to escape the oppressive atmosphere of my own apartment, or maybe the night's mysteries had led me here by fate. The lobby's rich wood paneling and muted lighting offered a stark contrast to the chaos of my thoughts, yet nothing could quite soothe the tension that clung to me. I took a seat on one of the deep, velvety chairs, my eyes drifting over the subdued grandeur around me. Moments later, I spotted Lydia, an old friend whose vivacity had always been a beacon in my darker times. I waved her over, eager for a conversation that might distract me from the lingering unease. "Lydia, you wouldn't believe the night I just had," I began, my voice low and earnest. Instead of the empathetic nod I expected, she launched into a tale of her latest whirlwind romance. "Caroline, love is so unpredictable. I met this guy. He's charming, spontaneous, and oh so adventurous," she declared with an effervescent smile that felt painfully out of sync with my mood. I tried to steer the conversation toward the strange midnight call from Brooke, hoping for some understanding. "But have you ever experienced something unsettling? A call that changed everything?" I ventured. Lydia's eyes sparkled briefly before she deflected. "You know, sometimes life is more about following your heart than unraveling every mystery." Her words, though kind, left me with more questions than answers. I couldn't shake the feeling that even in this realm of luxury, there were hidden shadows that most people chose to ignore. Before I could dwell further on the enigma of the night, a soft voice called my name from behind the reception desk. It was Marcus, the bartender I had come to know for his quiet wisdom and observant nature. Leaning casually against the counter, he murmured, "Caroline, there's more to this place than meets the eye. You'd be surprised at the secrets hiding behind these polished doors." His tone was laced with caution and a hint of warning, making me wonder if the hotel itself was a microcosm of the betrayals and duplicity that haunted my personal life. My phone buzzed abruptly, breaking the murmur of the lobby. It was Brooke. Her message was brief, almost cryptic. "Meet me on the balcony. I need you." The urgency in her tone was unmistakable. As I glanced between Lydia's light-hearted chatter and Marcus's sober advice, a deep chill ran down my spine. The mysterious call from earlier had left me rattled, and now, with Brooke summoning me into the night air, the stakes felt even higher. I excused myself quietly from Lydia's enthusiastic tales and left the lobby, each step heavy with a mix of trepidation and resolve. Marcus's parting words echoed in my ears. "Be careful, Caroline. Not everything is as it seems." As I stepped out into the cool corridor that led to the hotel's balcony, I couldn't help but feel that the secrets of this place, and the ones entwined with my own life, were waiting to be unearthed. The tension, like an unseen force, pushed me onward into a night that promised more revelations than comfort. I sat alone in a small, vintage coffee shop tucked away in the historical district of Portland, nursing a strong, bitter espresso that barely dulled the tremors in my hands. The early morning light filtered through stained glass windows, casting a patchwork of colors on the worn wooden floor. Every sip of coffee was a reminder that, despite the chaos of the past night, life was slowly resuming its rhythm, even if that rhythm was jagged and uncertain. I couldn't help but replay the events in my mind. The eerie midnight call, Derek's inexplicable haste, and Brooke's desperate plea had left me adrift in a sea of doubts. With every passing minute, my inner turmoil grew louder than the quiet hum of conversation around me. I found myself questioning every interaction from the night before. Was Derek's secretive behavior a sign of deeper betrayal, or had my overactive imagination turned fear into a monster? The owner of the coffee shop, a former musician named Sam, noticed the troubled look on my face as he approached with a gentle smile. "Rough night, Caroline?" he asked, setting down a second cup of coffee for me. His voice was warm, yet carried an undercurrent of wisdom that only someone who'd seen life's harsher sides could have. "Sometimes, the toughest nights bring us the clearest mornings," he added, his words wrapping around me like a well-worn sweater. I managed a half-smile in return, grateful for his presence, but still wary of the fragile state of my thoughts. Just as I was beginning to reflect on Sam's quiet counsel, my phone buzzed insistently on the table. I hesitated before picking it up, a surge of anxiety making my heart beat even faster. It was a text message from Brooke. The message was succinct, almost cryptic. "Trust, but not blindly." Those 4 words struck me with the force of a revelation. They resonated in the silent spaces of my mind, amplifying the doubts and questions that had been festering since the night's disturbing events. Brooke's reminder was both a caution and a call to action, urging me to balance my inherent trust with a newfound wariness. The message made me pause and wonder, was this a subtle warning about someone close to me, or a piece of advice meant to steer me through the tangled web of my current reality? My thoughts spiraled back to Derek, whose behavior had been puzzling at best. The morning light now seemed less comforting, its gentle glow revealing the stark contours of a truth I wasn't ready to face. I questioned whether I had been too naive, too trusting of the people who were supposed to be my pillars of support. As I sat there, the clamor of the coffee shop around me faded into a distant murmur, leaving only my inner voice to guide me. I resolved quietly and firmly that I would confront these uncertainties head-on. Today wasn't just about mending a broken night. It was about piecing together the fragments of trust and betrayal that had splintered my world. Every conversation, every text, every memory was a clue. And as I took another slow sip of my espresso, I vowed to seek the truth, no matter how painful or convoluted it might be. The night had finally embraced me again as I stepped into an underground art space perched atop an abandoned warehouse in Boston. The air was electric with anticipation, the venue a blend of crumbling industrial edges and modern artistic flair. I wasn't sure what drew me here, but something deep inside insisted that tonight's private concert might offer the answers, or at least a distraction, from the dissonance that had plagued my recent days. I found a spot near the back, where the muted glow of vintage string lights barely lit the worn concrete floor. The stage was set with a solitary grand piano, its surface reflecting the flicker of candlelight. Then, as if emerging from a long-hidden corner of her soul, Brooke stepped up to the piano. Her presence was magnetic, and she began to play with a passion that left me breathless. The notes flowed with an intensity that spoke of hidden dreams and long-buried secrets, transforming the space into a realm where every key echoed the complexities of our tangled lives. In the midst of the entrancing melody, I caught a glimpse of Derek in the crowd. He stood there with a fixed, almost reverent gaze, his eyes locked on Brooke as if he was witnessing something forbidden. The sight twisted something inside me, a silent scream of betrayal mingled with confusion. His interest in her wasn't casual. It was charged with an intensity that made my heart sink. I wondered if the trust one had once placed in him was now nothing more than a fragile illusion. After the performance, I slipped backstage to confront the surge of emotions. The dimly lit corridor beyond the stage was quiet, and I found Brooke alone, her eyes still shining with the remnants of her performance. "You've never seen me like this," she whispered, her tone carrying a mix of pride and vulnerability. I asked her about the depth in her playing, the raw emotion that bordered on something dangerous. She hesitated, then hinted, "There are truths behind every note. Some secrets, even our own hearts, are entwined with more than just family. Marcus, he's a part of the story too." Her words struck me like a blow, a revelation that further muddled the web of our lives. I pressed her gently. "What do you mean? How does Marcus fit into all of this?" But before she could elaborate, she only offered a cryptic smile and said, "Not all confessions can be spoken in one night. Some must be felt, not heard." Her mysterious answer left me standing there, grappling with a mix of admiration for her talent and a growing suspicion about the loyalties of those I thought I knew. As I retreated from the backstage, the night air felt heavy with the weight of unanswered questions. The music, the confessions, and the lingering glances between Derek and Brooke had rewritten the script of my reality. I realized that this concert was not merely a performance. It was a turning point where passion, betrayal, and hidden desires collided, setting the stage for the unraveling of long-held illusions and the painful birth of new truths. The elegant dining room in Chicago was awash in soft, golden light, but the atmosphere at the family dinner felt anything but warm. I sat at a long table surrounded by familiar faces, each smile and polite nod masking the tension simmering beneath the surface. As conversations floated around us, I couldn't ignore the way every laugh seemed forced, every glance too calculated. Midway through the dinner, my eyes were drawn to Derek. There, near the edge of a table, he was leaning in a bit too closely to one of the waitresses. Her laughter was light and flirtatious, and his smirk told a story of secrets that didn't belong at our family gathering. I felt a cold spike of betrayal. His careless flirtation, so overt and dismissive, was a stark violation of the trust one had once placed in him. I couldn't keep silent any longer. "Derek, what the hell are you doing?" I demanded, my voice barely containing the mix of anger and hurt that roiled inside me. The table fell silent for a heartbeat. His eyes darted around, and he muttered something about just some harmless fun, but his tone lacked any genuine remorse. The air thickened with discomfort as whispers of discontent rustled around the table. Later that evening, the tension escalated further when I found myself alone with Brooke in a quieter corner of the restaurant. The veneer of our polished family image was shattered, revealing raw, painful truths. "Brooke, I know there's more you're not telling me," I said, unable to hide the edge in my voice. "You've been keeping secrets about Marcus, and it's tearing us apart." My words landed heavily between us, and her eyes flashed with a mix of shock and indignation. "You always jump to conclusions," she snapped, her voice low and brittle. "Maybe if you actually listened instead of assuming, you'd understand what's really happening." The room around us seemed to blur as our voices grew louder, each sentence laced with accusation and regret. I pressed on. "I trusted you, and now I feel like everything I believed in is a lie." Every syllable was a dagger, and her retort came swift and bitter. "Your trust isn't a free pass to control everything, Caroline." The conversation spiraled, and with every exchanged remark, the dinner became less a reunion and more a battleground. Every passing moment exposed layers of betrayal, not just Derek's careless infidelity, but the quiet deceptions that had long festered between Brooke and me. In that moment, I realized how fragile our bonds had become. The polished smiles and rehearsed pleasantries of the evening were crumbling into something unrecognizable. As I left the restaurant later, the cool Chicago night air hit me like a reality check. The memory of Derek's smirk, the sting of Brooke's accusations, and the heavy silence that followed every outburst replayed in my mind. I understood then that betrayal often hides in the mundane, the subtle flirtations, the whispered secrets, the unspoken lies. Tonight, the facade of our family's unity had finally broken, leaving behind nothing but raw, painful truth and the lingering question of whether trust could ever be rebuilt. The fluorescent lights of our modern Atlanta office never seemed to dim the weight of my thoughts as I stepped into the creative agency that had become my second home, and lately, a battleground for my emotions. The events of last night still echoed in my mind. The bitter dinner, the accusations, and the unraveling of the fragile trust one had clung to. Today, I was determined to rebuild what was left of my world, even if the process was painfully slow. Before I could fully immerse myself in work, the office buzzed with whispers. Brooke's shocking announcement had spread like wildfire. She had officially confirmed her relationship with Marcus. I felt the news hit me like a jolt of ice water. In a brief, hushed conversation with a coworker by the water cooler, I heard, "They're so happy together now, aren't they?" It's like everything just shifted. I couldn't help but think of the dinner, where every lie had seemed to unravel like a worn thread. Was it possible that, while I was drowning in betrayal, they had found a way to salvage something from the wreckage? Derek, who had once been my rock, now appeared more as a shadow of regret. I encountered him in the hallway, his eyes avoiding mine as if they were too laden with guilt. "Caroline, I'm sorry," he muttered when I confronted him about the latest revelation of his infidelity. His apology felt as empty as the promises he once made, and each word only deepened the hollow ache in my chest. I never meant to hurt you," he continued, but his tone betrayed a rehearsed script rather than genuine remorse. I could no longer trust the facade he wore. The day wore on, and as I navigated between project meetings and client calls, the office corridors became a stage for whispered speculations about personal lives merging with professional ambitions. The hypocrisy of our surroundings, a place of creativity and ambition, seemed magnified by the personal betrayals that had spilled over into every conversation. In one fleeting moment of solitude, I caught a glimpse of my own reflection in a glass partition and wondered when I had become so entangled in the web of deceit and double standards. Then, as if fate decided to interject with its own cruel irony, I found myself alone with Marcus after a long meeting. The air between us was charged with something unspoken, a vulnerability that transcended the office gossip. Our eyes met in the hallway, and in that fleeting second, the lines between professional decorum and personal longing blurred. "Caroline," he said softly, stepping closer, "I know this is complicated, but sometimes in our brokenness, we find what we're truly looking for." Before I could respond, he brushed his lips against mine, a kiss that was as unexpected as it was electrifying. In that brief, suspended moment, the pain of betrayal and the lure of new beginnings collided. I felt my heart shatter and mend all at once. Was this a betrayal of another kind, or a bittersweet awakening to desires I'd long suppressed? I couldn't tell. Yet, as Marcus pulled away and our eyes locked in a silent understanding, I realized that in this labyrinth of infidelity and double standards, every kiss, every whispered word, carried the potential to redefine my truth. And so, standing in the sterile corridor of our creative agency, I braced myself for the journey of self-discovery that lay ahead, a journey paved with both regret and the promise of redemption. I arrived at the secluded coastal cottage with little more than a duffel bag and a heavy heart, seeking refuge from the tangled web of betrayal and shattered trust that had consumed my life. The ocean roared in the distance, a ceaseless reminder that change, like the tide, was inevitable. I set down my bag and stepped outside, the salty air immediately filling my lungs and washing away some of the city's heavy residue. Every crashing wave seemed to echo the unresolved conflicts and whispered promises of a fresh start. As I wandered along the rugged path leading to the weathered front door, I recalled the dark nights, painful confessions, and stolen kisses that had marred my recent days. I was determined to break free from the relentless cycle of deceit, even if it meant confronting my own vulnerabilities. I needed to find redemption, not in someone else's arms, but within the depths of my own soul. Later that afternoon, while sitting on the creaking porch and watching seagulls dive gracefully over the churning sea, I met Abby, a dear friend from years past whose warmth and honesty had always guided me through life's storms. "Caroline, you've been running for too long," she said softly, handing me a steaming cup of tea. Her eyes, kind and perceptive, held a quiet wisdom that made me feel seen. "It's time to forgive yourself and find strength in your scars," she added. I listened intently, each word resonating as a gentle call to let go of my past and embrace a future that wasn't defined by betrayal. We spent hours talking, our conversation weaving through memories of lost loves, personal failures, and the hard-won lessons of trust. Abby's voice was both soothing and invigorating, urging me to confront the rawness of my emotions rather than bury them away. "Sometimes, Caroline, we need to hit rock bottom to rebuild stronger," she said with a small, knowing smile. Her words stirred something inside me, a spark of hope amid the wreckage. That night, as a cool breeze stirred the curtains in the small living room, I couldn't resist the allure of the moonlit beach. The stars above shimmered like distant promises, and the gentle lullaby of the ocean beckoned me outside. Walking barefoot on the cool sand, I let the rhythmic sound of the waves guide my thoughts. Every step I took seemed to carry away a fragment of my pain. Lost in the moment, I encountered a stranger, a quiet figure whose eyes met mine with a mix of understanding and quiet longing. Without a word, we stood together under the expansive night sky, the ocean song wrapping us in its timeless embrace. In a spontaneous moment of vulnerability, I leaned in and our lips met, a kiss that wasn't driven by lust, but by the desperate need for connection and renewal. In that fleeting, bittersweet exchange, I felt the stirring of new beginnings, a gentle promise that perhaps, despite the scars, I could learn to trust again and rediscover the strength within me.